we'll do a review. We'll put the Sichas in Chelek Chof Aleph, volume 21. We'll do the Sicha for parshas Zachor. In this Sicha, the Rebbe explains the importance of remembering Amalek in the most refined ways that a person may have an Amalek in himself, meaning that while you know and learn, but you can't bring out that which you know should impact your actions. The Yud-K and the Vav-K, the actions which is associated and should follow the knowledge that you have, don't necessarily work together. That's Amalek. Rebbe will explain, why do we make such a big deal about a parsha of Zechiras Amalek, which we don't find by other Zechiras? We have to remember other items, and yet it's specifically by Zechiras Amalek, because in every level that we are, we have to caution. We have to make sure that we don't allow the Amalek in. That is important for the service of Hashem, as the Rebbe will explain in the Sikha. Let's learn inside. Parshas Zachor, Ois Aleph. Oiv der Takone Kriyas Parshas Zachor. So first, the Rebbe is going to bring out the question in the Mogen Avraham. How come the only Zechira that we have a Parsha associated with it, reading in the Torah, is the portion of Zachor? There's other Zechiras, and we don't have a special portion. So, Oiv der Takone from Kriyas Parshas Zachor, about this institution of the rabbis instituted to read the portion of Zachor, Leinen b'Torah, them Shabbos far Purim, the parsha for Zachor, to read in the Torah on the Shabbos that precedes Purim, the portion of Zachor, as we read in the Torah in the Shabbos for Purim, Zachor asher oscha Amalek. Zachor asher oscha Amalek, remember that which Amalek did to you. Frag der Mogen Avraham. So the Mogen Avraham asks, we find many mitzvahs in which the Torah tells us to remember. As for example, in the blessings of the Shema, and also in the Shema. Well, in the Shema, of course, itself, we have Yitzias Mitzrayim. That's why the Rebbe says Shema. But the Birchas Kriyashma, the Rebbe brings down, also we find in the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch in Siman Samach. So the Alter Rebbe writes over there that the special, what we have to be mekaven on the brachas, when we do the brachas, that all these zechiros and how they fit in the wording that we do in the Birchas Shema, before the Shema. So over there, he says, we have to remember, brought down from the Mogen Avraham, Matan Torah, the Torah was given to us, Ma'aseh Amalek, the act of Amalek, Ma'aseh Miriam, the story with Miriam, Shabbos, and Ma'aseh Ha'egel, the remembering Shabbos, and also the story of the Egel. And over there, the Alter Rebbe brings down also how in the words of the bracha of Havas Olam, all these zechiros are mentioned over there. So we find a lot of zechiros, but the only time that we have a special parsha read for it is Parsha Zachor. V'osotman mesakin given so leinen b'Torah Parshas Amalek Davke. So how come they instituted? Why was it instituted to read in the Torah, specifically the portion of Amalek, who need b'zchiris achedim and not in the other remembrance that we have to remember. We don't have a parsha in the Torah. The Rebbe is going to bring down the answer of the Magen Avraham, but the Rebbe is going to say that that answer is not sufficient. And the Rebbe is going to explain that there is something special about remembering Amalek, which is more than remembering by any of the other inyonim. So the Rebbe brings down Unerfaretvet. So what is the Magen Avraham answer? As matan Torah yesh lanu chag atzeres, because we have a yontav of Shavuos, which is for the giving of the Torah. So that's remembered that way. V'hu adin Shabbos, and to remember the Shabbos, we have Shabbos. Omaisa Miriam, Omaisa Egel, and the story of Miriam, in which she spoke bad about her brother, about Moshe Rabbeinu, and also the Maisa Egel, the story of the golden calf that the Jews made. Lo tikno, over there they did not institute a remembrance, mipnei shahoyo genuson shal Yisrael, because that's a shame of Israel. So Shavuos and Shabbos have Yom Tov. Miriam and Egel are embarrassment for the Yidden, and Zechiras Amalek doesn't have any time of the year that we mention it, so we created, therefore, the reading of the Torah of the parshas Zachor. That's what the Magen Avraham answered. But the Rebbe says, L'chayre is dos aber nit kein tirutz maspik. This is not a sufficient answer, because Purim can serve just like Shabbos and Shavuos to remember Shabbos and Matan Torah. We can have Purim serve as the remembrance for Amalek. Well, Oich b'mais Amalek is doch for Purim, because the story of Amalek we have Purim. Was is verbunden mit Zechiras u'mechias Amalek, which is associated with remembering and erasing Amalek. These, it's not only that it's associated, but we say that when you read on Purim, what do we read on Purim? So the reading of Purim itself talks about Amalek. So we could have used Purim itself instead of having to have a special Kriya Parshas Zachor. These as the Kriya from Purim, to the extent that the reading of Purim is the Parsha from Milchemes Amalek. That is the portion that talks about the war of Amalek by Yovei Amalek, that Amalek came and he waged war. So we have the story of Amalek on Purim itself. And even more than that, the reason we read the Parsha Zachor before, so those was Parsha Zachor, is that Shabbos for Purim. The reason that Zachor is the Shabbos before Purim is so that we don't have the doing Mechias Amalek with Purim take place before we remember. Hastes doch. So that means that Purim is the time that we're doing. As Purim is the Asiyah from the Zechira, the Parsha Zachor. So that Purim is the doing of that which we remember in Parsha Zachor. So we see very clearly that Purim is the Amalek Parsha, and the Amalek event that we're trying to mention over here. So why do we need a special Torah reading before Purim and not just read the Purim? Farhain Farvos, Darf men haben a besondere Takone of Kriyas Chiras Amalek. We have a special institution for reading the remembrance of Amalek. Bis as der Shabbos wird angerufen, Shabbos Parsha Zachor, to the extent that the Shabbos is called the Shabbos in which we read the portion of Zachor. Okay, is the fun mashma. So from this we can understand as the takona from parshas Zachor that the institution of this portion of Zachor is nicht nor was is nicht tokens man miyuchad. It's not only, as the Magen Avram suggests, not only for that reason, because there is no specific time of Sudermon and Maisa Amalek to mention the happening of Amalek, nor Valis is do Yisrin Inyan Miyuchad, but rather there is an advantage and there is a special idea that we're trying to present with reading the Yuchad and Zchiras, Maisa Amalek, and remembering the act of Amalek, Agabe the andere Zchiras, relative to the other remembrance. So we need to understand what is that Inyan Meyuchad by Zchiras Maisa Amalek? What is this special idea that we have by remembering the act of Amalek? What is Nito by the andere Zchiras that does not exist by the other remembrance? By the other remembrance, we did make a special Torah reading for them. And there's something special to remember erasing Amalek that we instituted a special reading. Was there far, but mendavke for their zechira. So therefore, specifically for that remembrance, they set up a special reading. The Rebbe is going to say logically the whole story with Amalek is a very specific, and it's not an applicable item today. Nowadays, the whole thing with Amalek, we can't do it today, B'chlal, because we're not in the position to erase Amalek. So what's the purpose in mentioning it? The other items that we don't find a parshas seem to be a lot more needing of remembering them because they have lessons and messages. On the contrary. The other mentionings in Yonim Klolim in der Hanhoge von Aiden, they are general ideas in the conduct of a Yid during every time and every space we can make use of those remembrance. For example, take Maimed Har Sinai, remembering our standing by Mat Sinai, Matan Torah, giving the Torah. Is doch der Yesod von ganz Torah und Mitzvah Seo. That is the foundation, the basis of all of Torah mitzvahs, which we got by Matan Torah. So that should be the first thing, important remembrance. Shabbos, then take Shabbos, is from the mitzvah klolius. That's from the general mitzvahs. Was is poil that impacts need nor them talk from Shabbos, not only on the Shabbos day, nor of alle sheishes me'achol, but also on all the 6 weekdays it impacts. So that would seem to be able to use a good remembrance for that. On the other hand, Maisa Hegel, remembering the Egel is a very important part because the Egel is Hepech von which is contrary to I am God, your God. You should not have other gods, right? And further, as far as the Egel is concerned, as Hashem says, when I will remember sins, I will also remember the sin of the Egel. So this reminds a Jew, you must be careful to stay away from that. This is only tkumen zu, so you don't come to efkoid aleihem avoinoiseyem. I will remember for them their sins, and then the Eibishter will add to it the Egel, so the sin of the Egel. So very important to remember the Egel, so we don't come to increasing the sins. But this would include in Aseitov, to keep Aseitov. So that should be something we should make a big to do and have a Kriyas Torah for that. And even when I feel a Maisa Miriam, even the story of Miriam, was his Lecheda and Inyan Prati, that seems to be a personal, a detail, a matter of a specific, which has to do with Miriam and Aaron or Moshe. Was hat nicht gebracht King Tetzoes for Klal Yisrael for alle Deures. That did not bring any results for the Jewish people as a whole for all generations. So maybe, but that too is a very important. Is over Euch dem Faran Ahira, but also in there is included a lesson. So alle Yidden, to all Yidden, by Wifel as Darb sein des Hiris, for Lashon Hara, the extent in which we need to be careful from speaking evil tongue, Lashon Hara. Was is from the Avedes, Achi Chamuris. This is one of the very serious sins, because Al Zogan, as our sages of blessed memories tell us about Lashon Hara, as is Magdil Avoinus, that it increases the sins corresponding connected Gimel Avedas to the three most serious Avedas of sins: Aveda Zora, idol worship, Gilu Arayas, prohibited relationship with Shvichas Doming and pouring of blood, killings. That's what the level of Lashon Hara brings to. So it's very important to be careful in Lashon Hara. Und zusammen damit, and together with the fact that there are such serious offenses, something which is very difficult to be careful. It's totally very difficult to be totally careful not to speak Lashon Hara. So we could use a Kriyas Torah for that. So in all of these cases, Matan Torah, the Shabbos, and the Egel, and Lashon Hara Miriam, we don't have a Torah portion. But what's so important? When we talk about remembering what Amalek did, is as a mitzvah pratis. This seems to be a specific mitzvah. It seemingly does not include in Libun Fayed Eden Banagose. It doesn't have a lesson for every Jew in his conduct. Nor Alimud Kloli. This is just a general lesson. So why is it that that is the only one that got the Kriyas HaTorah? Shabbos parshas Zachor, we read the parshas of. In base, the Rebbe says we're not even able today to do the mitzvah of erasing Amalek, which is the purpose of remembering Amalek. So why are we even reading Amalek and remembering when we can't do the goal of the mitzvah is to erase it? Based it to me, and them is noch starker. The surprise in this is even greater, stronger. The tachlis from Zechiras Amalek, the goal of remembering Amalek is mechias Amalek, is to erase Amalek. As the flow of the verses. After the Torah says Zachor, remember, Pasuk says, and it will be when God, your God, will let you relieve you from all your enemies, etc. Timcha as zeicher Amalek, then you shall erase the remembrance of Amalek. So that means that the purpose of the remembering is to erase it. Only the Rambam is thus maspir. As the Rambam explains, this tzivonu lizkor masha osolonu Amalek. Hashem commanded us to remember that which Amalek did to us. And to hate him. At every time and time. And we should encourage and arouse our soul with these sayings to wage war against them. That seems to be the goal and the purpose of remembering what Amalek did. Only bald bisman hazeh is nit shayich to mekayim zayin dem tzivui for mechias Amalek b'poyel. Nowadays, it is not possible to fulfill literally, in actuality, the command of erasing Amalek in actuality for two reasons. Vile. Number one, the mitzvah doesn't apply nowadays. Bald mit aleph mitzvahs mechias Amalek. That's only when the Jews are on their land in Eretz Yisrael. And in a situation of relax. As the pasuk quoted before, when God allows you, leaves you from all the enemies from around you, then but we're not in that position. We have the enemies. We're not in the situation. So therefore, we're not at a time now that we can fulfill erasing Amalek literally base. And number two, even if this would have been the conditions are now, is it meglich to the mechias Amalek? Even if we had the conditions, we were in charge, we were in control, but we still cannot fulfill the erasing of Amalek because Sanchenev came and mixed up the entire world. We don't know who Amalek is, and we don't know. And then the whole Parish, on every person that separates from the majority, we say it's one of the majority. It's not Amalek. We don't even know who Amalek is today. Kumtois. So it turns out, as an Inya for Schidas Amalek Bisman Hazeh, the idea of remembering Amalek in 9 days is nit azoy negei lepoil. It's not something which impacts practically in actuality. And yet, when Afal became, the surprise is, but then Davke, if there is a chira, it was specifically, but that remembrance, we set up a special reading and a special Shabbos. Why is that? So, Gimel. So the Rebbe says, we'll understand this. Why Taka, that there's something special about remembering Amalek? Because why do we have to remember Amalek when it's not possible? Why is there a separate mitzvah? And why is there two mitzvahs to remember and to erase? A lot of times we have a mitzvah to erase without having to remember in order to erase. Why is that? There's something about the mitzvah just by remembering, which accomplishes is a tremendous accomplishment. That's why we have a Shabbos, and that's why we read it for Gimel. And those Verstehen Behagdim Habir will understand it by introducing the explanation in the Etzem Inyan for Mitzvah Zchiras Amalek, in the idea itself of the mitzvah. What is the mitzvah of remembering Amalek? It would seem, number one, why remember Amalek when we can't fulfill what we're supposed to do? We can't erase it. Aleph. Bald as their tachlis from Zechidas Amalek is, since the ultimate goal of remembering Amalek is Mechias Amalek and knowledge, to erase Amalek, as we said before, Parvos is do der chiyuv of Zechidas Amalek. So why is there an obligation to remember Amalek also in a time when Al Pi Torah is nit shayich Mechias Amalek the Toil? According to the Torah, we don't have the possibility of erasing Amalek in actuality. So why remember him when we can't do it? And number two, why do we b'chalal have two separate mitzvahs? Once to remember, and then we get angry at Amalek, and then erase. Parvos base. Why do we need to, in general, have a separate command? Zachor es asher asa lecha Amalek. Remember that which Amalek has done. In day to as the Rambam quoted before, in order to arouse the souls with his saying to wage war him. Unless he's nit genug der Tzibur, why is it not sufficient, the command from Timcha as Zachor Amalek Alein, just erase the remembrance of Amalek? For example, where it says Leischaya Kol Neshama, it doesn't say remember what they did, Leischaya. Derech with der Tzibur Leischaya Kol Neshama. B'shaychas design is when the command of don't let live all of this, any of the souls of the seven nations, was men gefindt nit a besonder Zivui. We don't find a separate command to gedenken zeyer meisim roim chulu, so remember their bad deeds. It just says don't let them live. Was bringen dazu, so we remember what they did, and that'll bring to you as the Eider and the Fortune the Lochem to arouse our soul to wage war. We don't find it. So why is it that we have a separate mitzvah? So there has to be that just in remembering itself, you're doing, it's not just preparing to wage the war, but you are accomplishing just by remembering Amalek. Is the von Gufe gedrungen. So from this itself, we can derive as apal pi as der tachlis von zechiras Amalek, that although the goal of remembering Amalek is mechias Amalek, is erasing Amalek, there is ober do an inyan was tut sich oif. There is an aspect, there is an idea that is accomplished in zechiras Amalek farzich, just remembering Amalek for itself. So even when you can't accomplish mechias Amalek bisman hazeh, even we have a separate mitzvah just remembering Amalek. Was there far rechem the Rambam? That's why the Rambam counts al derech ze andere meine mitzvahs, and also others that count the mitzvahs. Mechias Amalek and schiras Amalek, erasing Amalek and remembering Amalek, als zwei besondere mitzvahs. It has two separate mitzvahs, mit besondere gedorim, which have different, separate definitions and separate boundaries. The dogma, as for example, mechias Amalek, erasing Amalek, is from the mitzvahs of Zayin Choyva ala Tzibur. That is from those mitzvahs which are communal obligation. It's not an individual obligation to erase Amalek, but it's something which is upon the community. Only Kamadeyas, and then some opinions hold it does a mitzvah of Melech. That's a mitzvah of the king from the Tzibur, from the community. Und die Mitzvah hat kamet noim, and then this mitzvah has many conditions. Only after the Bnei Yisrael entered into the land, right? So we have the definitions when, how, and who is obligated in the mitzvah of erasing Amalek. But then, as opposed to this totally separate mitzvah, Masha'enkin Zchiras Amalek, as opposed to remembering Amalek, is a mitzvah of Yed Yochid Bazunder. It's a mitzvah for each individual separately. When it's a mitzvah T'midus, it's a constant mitzvah, B'chol Mokim in every place, B'chol Zman in every time. Und der Inyan wird aufgetan. So that is accomplished. The mitzvah by itself is accomplished through Zchiras Amalek Farzik, just remembering Amalek, just by remembering Amalek. Not as a for erasing him, but there's something just by remembering Amalek. is an Inyan clothing gans Torah. That's a very general matter in all of Torah. Noch mehr wie der andere Schiris Hanal. This is more than the other remembrance, Kidlakaman Siv Zayin, as we'll see later on in Siv Zayin. Dalit. So what's the explanation of this? The Inyan von Amalek is Yedeya Esri Boinoi, or Miskaven Limred Boy. Amalek's, the idea of Amalek is he knows his master, and yet he intends to rebel against them. Und therefore, Eider Ra'id can Mekayim Zayin, Mechias Amalek, before a Yid can fulfill erasing Amalek from Amalek Kipshute, Amalek literally. Muzer Frier Bavorner, he first must caution as by in him, that by him and in him, Alain, only Zayin Amalek, that you should have your own Amalek. It shouldn't be at the level of Yedeya, Sereboine, Biskavan, limited by that you know your master and you have intent to rebel. Afilu nid bedakas, even and not in its finest, in the refined way, lakaman sibova lena sibova. Und das ist der Teuchen von Mitzvah Zechiras Amalek. This is the content of the mitzvah of remembering Amalek. See, is need nor as a korin. It is not only a remembrance, but darf me'er sein suton la'achare zanasiyah, to arouse you to do later on something about, to bring you to Mechias Amalek, Milchemes Mechias Amalek Pshutei, the war and the racing Amalek, literally, other, or as durch them Zekorim, soll man sich aushitten von an Inyan Diltirosi, or through this remembrance, you are going to try to keep yourself from doing something which is not positive, not acceptable. So those are the other members that we have. Similar to the remember the act of Miriam to protect your Lashon Hara. So those are remembrance to protect for the future, for later on, to protect. But here we're talking about something, the remembrance itself. There's Chidas Amalek Gufa, but the actual remembering Amalek itself, Tut Oif Mechias Amalek Shebelev. This accomplishes erasing Amalek in your heart, in Gufa, in the person itself. Es can sein by Eden Amalek Benafshe. There could be a person in his soul has an Amalek. Mosvil poil zayin if im as zol moired zayin chas v'sholem in Rebbeinu. He wants to, something in the person wants to influence him that he should rebel, God forbid, in his master. Und wenn der Zachor es asher osu l'cha Amalek. So when the remembering what Amalek did to you is by imki the boy, is by the person as needs to be, he remembers it. That accomplishes erasing and nullifying the Amalek in your soul. As wird ausgewurzelt, it becomes uprooted. Und ausgemerkt and erased jeder netia, any tilting from Yedeya Chulu, from knowing Hashem is common limited, they're intending to rebel. So based on this, you understand was dafke this zechira, that specifically this mentioning of men verbunden mit akriyam yuchedes b'Torah. We tie this to a special reading of the Torah. Val Torah is bal habayis of metzias ha'olam, because Torah dominates, rules over the existence of the world. Aderech divrei Chazal hayiduyim, similar of the known words of our sages of blessed memory. Alaposik lekeil goimer olai, on the verse lekeil goimer olai, that if there is a change in the date, so that it changes the facts in the world, so that the 3-year-old, if they changed when they blessed the Chodesh and they made the month, it will turn out that the fact of the world did not impact. It is Torah would in charge, tells you what the facts are, not the world that tells you what the facts are. The far through them was mefarbin chiras amalek mit kriyas haTorah. Through this that we connect, we tie, remembering Amalek with reading in the Torah, vertes azikorin. So this becomes a remembrance with tut oif mechias Amalek shebenefesh, that accomplishes erasing Amalek in the soul. We need a Torah reading to change a certain fact on the ground, that the person uproots his Amalek even in the refinest way that is in his heart. As Rebbe will explain later on. Thus is Oich Eine from the Biurim. This is also one of the explanation. Was Kriyas parshas Zachor is Ladas Reva Poskim, that the reading of the portion of Zachor, according to the opinion of most of the codifiers, a mitzvah sasei min haTorah, mitzvahs min haTorah. The Rebbe is going to say, while there is advantages in a mitzvah d'Rabbanan, but the advantage of a mitzvah of the Torah that it impacts the object. So while mitzvahs d'Rabbanan are sometimes known as they impact the gavra, like the person is not allowed to do something with Rabbanan, but there is no hefza, there's no object that is also as opposed to the Torah. But here we're trying to impact, that's why it's a mitzvah in Torah. Let's look inside. From the iluyim in mitzvahs, the raisa, the gabe mitzvahs, the Rabbanan, from the advantages of Torah commands over rabbinic commands, is was mitzvahs der Reise haben a starkere Peula auf und in the Welt. They have a stronger impact on and in the world. As it's known, at length the discussion in the later commentators was Zainen Mechalik, they distinguish, make a difference. As Isuri, the Reise Zainen Isur Hefza, the prohibition of the Torah are a prohibition that is on the object. The Zach werd Adover Betuav, the item becomes a repugnant matter, the Torah, if it becomes Osir. Ashenki, the Suri, the Rabbanon, as opposed to the prohibition of the rabbis, Zainen, like Kamadeyas, are, according to many opinions, Blois and Isur Gavra, they're only a personal prohibition. The Chachomim Legen Aroif and Isur, they mentioned, the sages place a prohibition on the person, but they don't put the prohibition on the objects of the worlds themselves. Yes, there is an advantage of rabbinic law in another area, but not on the impact on the world. Those was mitzvahs d'Rabbanan haben amayla of mitzvahs d'Oraisa. This that rabbinic mitzvahs have an advantage over mitzvahs of the Torah. Gemaimer Chazal, as the saying of our sages of blessed memory. The words of the scribes are more sweeter to me more than the words of the Torah. We see there is an advantage of mitzvahs rabbanon. He says, that is mainly as it connects to the person. because in the observance of the mitzvahs that the Rabbanan added, drickt sich ois de areves utshuka. Over there, it expresses itself, the sweetness and the yearning to sein an Eved Hashem, to be a servant of Hashem. It's a person's expression in the mitzvah that Rabbanan wants to be a sweet and yearning to be a servant of Hashem. But the far better, that's why he's saying, make upon us decrease, because they want to be servants of Hashem. And then he's not satisfied with that. And then he adds additional decrees. Or makes offense for the Torah Ligzedus. In order to ascertain and make sure that you fulfill the Gezedus. These are all expression of the person's connection and willingness to connect to Hashem. That's by mitzvahs that Rabbanan. But Torah mitzvahs impact the world. But further we can say, by mitzvahs the by the Torah mitzvahs, the Baal ze poilen in Welt, since they impact the world on a stronger way, is by ze nita zoi kentik, so you can't tell so much as me is mekaim the mitzvah blois mitzad tzivui HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Can't tell that you're doing it because Hashem told you to do so. Bal segulas hamitzvah ozitut oif be'olam is mile, because what the unique specialty that the mitzvah brings into the world blocks the connection that it's a person wanting to do the mitzvah, because you see there is something there from Kabbalah soil that you're accepting the yoke, you're doing it because you're an Eved Hashem, because you see there is something great being accomplished over here, so it blocks that it's being done out of accepting the yoke, which is the command of Hashem, as opposed to fulfilling the rabbinic mitzvahs. With this gulas mitzvahs is nitazei stark. The benefit and the mitzvah's accomplishment in the world is not so strong. So that expresses that when a yid does the mitzvahs, not because he is accomplishing great things in the world, or that he's an Eved Hashem, but rather he's a servant of Hashem that listens to the wishes and the command of the king. This is all expressing about the Gadra, about the person. That's the mitzvah Rabbanan. But as far as the accomplishment in the world, as far as the object, those of us mitzvahs and build this that mitzvahs need to accomplish in the world is adrabah. There is on the contrary, mitzvahs the raisa hom koyach Torah. The Torah mitzvahs have the power of the Torah to bewirken the hefze mitzvahs from Welt in an ofen, to impact the object, the mitzias, the existence of the world in an ofen versus the Torah mitzvahs the Rabbanan Canal, which does not exist by the mitzvah Rabbanan said before. Und der Fahr is kriyas parshas Zachor a mitzvah sesmen Torah. That's why reading the portion of Zachor becomes a positive mitzvah of the Torah. Because those gita koyach neusuk, this gives an additional power. This kriyas amolig zol oifton, that when you mention amolig, you're going to accomplish the mechiyas amolig, erasing amolig. We're talking not amolig in the world, but you're mentioning races your amolik within the person itself. Both. Al das Chidas Amolik is a mitzvah. Since the remembering Amolik is a constant mitzvah. It's verstandig, so it's understood. Das is an Inyan, was jeder darf sich in dem bewornen Tovit. So this is a matter that a person needs to always be cautioning and watching out from. Cholazman in all times. That is that Amolik, or Ma'afal as a hot mit kein Ord chad v'sholom chad v'sholom tzizom. Although there is really no room that we should say, God forbid, to say as a Yid darf sich tomid bavorenen, that a Yid needs to constantly caution and protect himself, forewarned from Nid Zaina Yedeas and the Boinim Eskaven Limrid, not to know Hashem and intending to rebel. It's not kind of hard to say that, but dafür overständig sein bewarnt. But you do always need to be forewarned and protected and cautioned in the meaning for Amolik Bedakas, in the idea of Amolik in a refined way. Bifrat, especially, even though it may start off as a refined way, as from then can soif ariskumen an inyan. But from this, in the end of the day, it might result in a matter from Yedeya Chulu Miskaven Limriboy, knowing Hashem and intending to rebel, Rahman al-Islam, may God protect us. Babir. So what is it that we're trying to forewarn by the person? From Posik of the word Ki Yod al Keis Yudke L'chomel Hashem B'Amalek, that Hashem wages war on Amalek, and Yod is al Keis Yudke. Zon Chazal. The sages of blessed memory say, as Ein Shmoi Sholem, God's name, which is Yud-K, Vav-K, is not whole, Achi Mocha Shmoi Amalek, until you erase the name of Amalek. Which means Amalek does not allow for a full name, Yud-K, Vav-K. Kol Zman Amalek is Kayim, is der Shem Nid Bishlemis. For as long as Amalek is in existence, Hashem's name is not whole. It's not Yud-K, Vav-K. See, is Blois Yud-K, Ki Yod al Keis Yud-K. It's only Yud-K. Which basically means Amalek is Menagid, the Oisius Vav-K, from Shem Havaya. Amalek opposes the letters of Vav-K of the name of Havaya. What does that mean? Why is Amalek not against Yud-K? Why only Vav-K? Bald as Amalek is miskaven limrid, since he wants to rebel against Hashem. In Everston, in the one above, is my timer. So why is the reason Aleph is menagid of shlemis Hashem? Why is he opposing only the whole name? Yud-K, Vav-K takes away the Vav-K. Why not against the whole name? Beis, in the Nigud of shlemis Hashem, and when he opposes, doesn't want the whole name, why is he only Vav-K, not the Yud-K? B'toif in Yud-K Shem not on the Yud-K, the name. Was his Koydim and Hechar from Vav-K, which comes first before the Vav-K. Why would Amalek not oppose Yud-K, only Vav-K? Himmel. Adarab, on the contrary, it's bleibt Yud-K. Even though he opposes, but there's still Yud-K. Bleibt the ganze Shem from the Zayin Shem Hashem Chokma. It still remains. The name Yud-K itself is one of the names that cannot be erased. So why is he not opposing that? He allows to be the name. The Bir was there. The explanation of this. The Pa'ulas from the Dalet Oishis, from Shem Havaya, the impact of these four letters of Hashem's name, Oifayidin, on a Yid, is in Umvizestein in Zayin Benefesh Odom, as they are standing in the soul of the person, which is Adama Le'elyon, compared to the one above that Hashem creates in our image. So the Yud-K Vav-K, which is in the human being, which is compared to the Yud-K Vav-K B'Tzalmenu. So how do we translate Yud-K Vav-K Zayin? Yud-K is Chochma Bina. That's the level of intellect. The Yud is Chochma, the He is Bina, Seichel. Vav is Midas Shabbalei V'Torah. Vav is the emotion, the heart. and Torah, and Hey is Dibra Maisa, that's speech and action mitzvahs. Iker Milchama Amolik, the main word of Amolik is a dominion from Toil Mamish, is on the idea of the actuality in the practical. If Moichin Alain, just on the intellect, Bechinas Yudke, is a nit azoy menaged, he does not oppose that so much. Im art nit azoy stark der Yedeyas Reboinoi. Doesn't bother him so much that you know your master. As mehot nor a verstanden elokus, that you have and remain just by understanding godliness. He doesn't object to that. Will ober, but what he wants is that those only poil sein of midas shemalev. It shouldn't impact the emotions of the heart. Was bringt to machshove dibur mais, that brings to thought, speech, and actions. In his bovke. The adraber. On the contrary, the most is the merida yuma b'yesar. If you know Hashem and you rebel, that's a much more terrible or awesome rebellion, great rebellion. Und das is mudgish and lashon chazal. This is emphasizing the language of our sage's blessed memory. Yedeyas riboinoi. He knows his master. He does have knowledge of Riboinoi. Deswegen is common limit, but yet he has the intention to rebel against him. Weil die Idee hat nicht kein Wirkung auf Midas und Machshava Dibur Maisa. Because this knowledge has no impact, doesn't affect the person's emotion and his thought, speech, and action. Und in dem Prat von Amolik, this detail of Amolik, as sein Yedeya es Riboinoi, that while you know your master, bringt nit Kabbalah's oil Riboinoi, does not bring to accepting the yoke of the master, al kol ponim later Yedeya, at least minimally according to the knowledge, was Kabbalah says machriach Torah mitzvahs, to know to the extent that accepting the yoke to do the mitzvahs. Un as felt by Kabbalah Rebbeinu, and if there is no accepting the yoke, is as bedakas midrida b'Rebbeinu. That means you're actually rebelling. Not accepting is rebelling. Those times this everybody needs to forewarn themselves and be careful. Well, in Eder Darge von Avodas V'Diyas Hashem, because in every step of service and knowing of Hashem, ken sein an inyan paratos in them inyan. There could be a mistake in this idea, oifen hakabbalah seil and the way of how to accept the yoke. Zion, the mitvet man euch verstehen, was Mohammed Amalek is vorgekommen, the derech betzeichen in Mitzrayim, that the war with Amalek took place on the road when they left Egypt, Farmat and Torah, before the Torah was given. Since every item, every matter is by divine, a specific supervision is move on, it's understood. And those gufa was Mulchemes Amalek begashmis is given koydem atan Torah, that the war of Amalek physically was before the Torah was given, is while Amalek beruchnis is menagid, because it happened before, because what Amalek opposes in the spiritual level is nit zulos and dem inyan b'chidush matan Torah, is not to allow for this idea and the novelty of Matan Torah. The oath of Matan Torah is the accomplishment of Matan Torah is as Torah lebashamayim. That Torah is not in the heavens. It shouldn't remain just in the spiritual level, nor as muzarov kumalamata, but rather it must descend below. Limud bepoil, to learn in actuality, on mitzvahs, maisias, davke, and mitzvahs in action davke. Not only to bring it to maisias, but that's the main thing, is to the action. But das is given Tainus HaMalachim. This was the argument of the angels. Amud Agenuzo, you have this beloved treasure, dear treasure. Noit Chalashamayim. Give your glory in the heavens. Vibald as Torah is Tachli Soduchni is Va'ilu. Since Torah is the ultimate spirituality and elevation, darf der Ort von to know where should it be given. The darf gegeben werden al hashomayim has to be given on the heavens. Was is hecher afilu from the ruchnius shabaylam hazeh sechalodam, which is higher, even of the spirituality of the elam hazeh sechalodam, not even to the intellect of the person. Keep it all together above. That's why this precedes before the Torah doesn't want to allow for the Torah's chiddush to transform the world. It wants it to remain in a spiritual level. When, however, we negate and we nullify this idea of Amalek, as from the intellect, it extends into actuality. There is the wholesomeness of the name. You also have Vavke in addition to Yudke Vavke. Then we can destroy and nullify the argument of the Malachim that say Noitcha Shamayim. And the Torah is given here below. This also explains this great matter of remembering Amalek. Which is more important than the other members. In Al Sifal, as we said before, Amalek, because remembering Amalek is a Haggadoma, it is an introduction. It's a condition to close a inyan from the Sinus HaTorah to the general concept of giving the Torah. Noch Eider Ayid nem Torah. Before a Yid can take Torah, moves by in Zayin Bittul Amalek. There needs to be the doing away, nullifying Amalek, was the Losnit Amshocher, the Merchin Midas Maisi, which does not allow to extend from the intellect into the emotion and action. Through fulfilling the mitzvah, remembering Amalek during the time of exile, was his mevatel Amalek shabir nefesh odom, which nullifies the Amalek which is in the soul of man, is mezayer, mezaris, or memayer. So you hasten and you make quickly. So that we should be able to fulfill the mitzvah of erasing Amalek literally, in the entire world of the Gashmis and in physicality. As says that inyan von minui melech, there will be the idea of appointment of a king, Malka Mashiach, which is King Mashiach. Was vet mevarer sein, wer is Amalek, he will verify and sort out who Amalek is. And then he will yilcham milchemes Hashem. He'll wage the war of Hashem. Koilel milchomer Hashem ba'Amalek, including the war of Hashem with Amalek, milchemes Amalek, v'inatzeach, and he'll be victorious. The noch that the boyin the Beis Hamikdash Ashlishi, and then he will build the third Beis Hamikdash. Mamish, quickly in our day, Mamish. This is Mesichas Shabbos parshas Zachor, Topshin Lamed, and Topshin Lamed.